Hey friends. I don't know if you saw the pictures that I uploaded. I did a really tough hike yesterday. I hiked with a group for the first time in a long while. I usually hike alone, but I feel the need to be around people a little bit more, which is good because I've been in hermit mode for a really, really long time. And I don't think that's always healthy, but I think sometimes it's necessary. So you kind of have to use discretion to make that decision for yourself. Some people need to be in hermit mode for a while. And for other people, it would drive them into, the depths of loneliness to a detriment. So you got to kind of like figure that out. But anyway, so I went for a hike with a group and they were awesome. I really enjoyed them. Great people. Very inspiring. Most of them older than me, which I kind of love because they were super fit. One of them has conquered most of the AT and they're just out there doing it, living life, love nature, love outdoors. And that's very inspiring and motivating for me, for sure. I like being around those people. So I had a nice time. It was 11.4 miles. I wiped out 3 times. 3 times. Once was pretty bad. I got a little banged up, but I'm okay. Someone else wiped out pretty bad too. A couple of us were bleeding. I mean, the trail wasn't for the faint of heart. They rate the trails instead of like easy, moderate, hard. They have like VM. No, they'll do like EM, easy, moderate, M, moderate, VS, very strenuous, VVS is very, very strenuous. And I think they have like a VVSS, which is the hardest. So I think yesterday was rated VVS, very, very strenuous. And I chose that hike because I've not been in Shining Rock Wilderness before. And that was a whole different ball game. I think it's in the Asheville, North Carolina area. And the views at the top, you can see it in the pictures, are just amazing. I love the challenge. It was really technical. There was some climbing involved. I love to climb. A little bit of scaling, which, there was one point where we were at least 10 feet up and there was really nowhere to go. So I do get a little nervous in those areas. But you just do it, somehow you just do it. So it's not that I feel tired today, but I've talked about this in other videos where I just have trouble with muscle recovery. So I'm achy. I got really swollen. I swell up in the woods sometimes. My fingers swell. I don't know if it's from Lyme. I really don't know what it's from. But I was swollen from head to toe yesterday. And I could feel it in my body, that heaviness. I don't like that feeling. But I hiked in honor of my brother. Normally I would hike on his anniversary, which is tomorrow, October 2nd. He will have been gone for 18 years. Can't believe it. I do my very best to celebrate his life and make the best of the day and not sink into the depths of grief. I will allow myself to feel deep emotion, but I make a promise to myself to not stay there that long. I talk a lot about grief on my channel, and that is in no way to say to somebody that if you are fresh in grief, to employ this as a strategy. That's not the time. I'm talking about losing someone 18 years ago. At the point of 18 years, I don't want to let myself go to those places. And I have. When I first moved to Brevard, I went through a bit of a collapse and I was steeped in a lot of grief, and it was like multifaceted. There was like personal heartbreak, stuff going on with my kids that I talked about. grieving my old life in South Carolina, which I didn't even think would be a thing because I was only there for 2 years. And then it dredged up grief of my mom and my brother. It happens. I mean, that's grief in a nutshell. It's very unpredictable. I always say we're here to have a human experience. People that work overtime to bypass their humanity, I think, is harmful. Spiritual bypassing is a real thing. Again, harmful. There's something that I refer to as spiritual masturbation. And what I'm referencing when I say that is just using all of these spiritual ideologies as a ploy towards almost like a bizarre and twisted form of enlightenment. I should probably give a concrete example of that. Okay, here's one. There is a person back in New Jersey who, there's a thing that happens with spiritual people that get sucked into the vortex of the more harmful aspects of spirituality. And my one friend and I used to laugh about this all the time. We would say, why do yoga teachers' voices change over time? Like they suddenly decide they're ultra spiritual and enlightened and they just talk different. And that's kind of what this person did. And she would run around, you know, she was a big Abraham and Hicks law of attraction fan. And some of those people are super ultra spiritual bypassers. I actually love one of Abraham's videos. What is it called? It'll come to me. But I no longer ascribe to that. I believe in the law of attraction. I think Abraham stuff gets really out of hand, and a lot of those people are spiritually bypassing. My opinion. You can disagree. And if you do disagree, comment and let me know your thoughts on it. But anyway, this person, they would really drive me crazy because they would run around and just be like, I don't ever experience anger. I don't ever get angry. I'm just never angry. I'm not an angry person anymore because I'm so enlightened by Abraham and Hicks teachings and the law of attraction, and I'm so much better than everybody else. And that's really what her tone of voice was saying, her mannerisms, the way she carried herself. And the funny thing is she smokes marijuana every day. I probably, if I smoked pot every day, and I don't smoke at all because I just can't. Like I get super anxious. I never liked it ever. But I could imagine that if I was smoking pot every day, I probably wouldn't feel angry either. Because if you do anything like that, that alters the structure of your brain cells, you're bypassing a lot of human emotion. I know a lot of people that smoke pot every day and they say to me, I'm not an angry person anymore. But at least those people know that it's because they smoke pot every day and not because they're really hopped up on the law of attraction. Anyway, that is my rant for this video. So back to the real point. Sorry about that, guys. Well, I'm really not. I just go where I go. There's always a point to what I'm saying. I really have learned to trust my voice and the things that come out of my mouth. But back to grief. I don't want to go to those places. I don't want to go to the depths of the grief. I believe when I moved to Brevard, it wasn't just grief over my brother. Like I said, it was coupled with a lot of other things happening in that moment. But I can't hike tomorrow in honor of him. And abbreviated version, I do have a video that talks about all of the tragedy and death that my family has experienced. It was quite enormous and not typical. What I didn't mention in that video is how many people called my family the Kennedys. So just think like Kennedy tragedy. And it was weirdly similar to that to an extent. But my brother fell off a mountain hiking at Acadia National Park in Bar Harbor, Maine on October 2nd, 18 years ago. You can look him up. My last name is on this channel. His first name was Richie Holshoe. He was written up in one of the rangers' books from that mountain on deaths that happened on the mountain. He was all over the news, used it as an example of what not to do, which I understand. But I can't hike tomorrow because I will be teaching all day. So I really wanted to hike with this group, and I wanted to get out to Shining Rock Wilderness, and I wanted to do something that was really going to challenge the crap out of me, and it did. So I'm just having trouble with recovery, which I always have. I knew it going into it that I was going to struggle the next day. Hopefully I will be in much better shape because I have a lot of classes to teach tomorrow, but I always put my best foot forward. I don't half-ass anything in my life, so I'll give it 110% and I'll get through the day. I popped some arnica and I'm off to find some rust tox. If you're not familiar with the homeopathic remedy rust tox, you can actually take arnica and rust tox in conjunction with each other. Rust tox is great for rheumatic complaints, asthma, and also inflammation. So it can be taken on its own. And these, I always give the abbreviated versions of what homeopathy can do for you. If you look in the Materia Medica, you can even Google like rust tox, Materia Medica, and it'll give you everything. How it affects the ears, the nose, the mouth, the stomach, the brain, literally. It's very sciencey and in depth. And if that's your jam, go for it. But I just try to scratch the surface here to save time and not have people bored. It's not everybody's thing, and I get that. But anyway, rust tox is an amazing remedy, and I think I'm going to try that. Another really good one is aconitum or aconite. Aconitum is great for fears and phobias. I actually dosed myself before I went rock climbing. It acts as a natural sedative for the nervous system, but it's amazing for shock, and that's probably what it's best known for. So when I lost my brother, I took aconite along with Ignatia for the grief and the heartbreak. So I hiked for my brother. He loved adventure. He loved to do crazy things. Yesterday it was strenuous. It was a lot. People were lovely. I actually asked them if they needed another guide, and they are open to me being a volunteer hiking guide for their group. So I'm excited about that. I hope it works out because I really value and appreciate these people. As I've said in other videos, I size people up pretty quickly, and I was very comfortable right from the start, and that's always a good sign for me. So, you know, when sometimes things feel a little bit like home, but you have no familiarity with the person or the place or the situation, and I just felt good being around them. So yeah, check out the pictures. Comment if you, sorry, I'm looking at a wasp. If you know my hornet and wasp situation here on the porch. I'm on the porch, but you're not seeing the view of the mountains and the shrubbery behind me. I'm facing our living room. And the wasp is getting very close to me. So I'm like, what is he gonna do? Because I feel like they remember me now. They're like, that's the wasp hornet killer. It's her. Get her. Now I'm paranoid. Anyway, so yeah, so I'm not going to do a video. I was going to do a video tomorrow and talk about my brother. But the last thing that I will leave you with is the amazing impact that my brother had on me in his passing. As hard and sad as it was, my brother really taught me how to live. And I'm grateful for that. You know, I just wasn't living life. I was very stuck. And my brother's passion for the outdoors and adventure, just something ignited in me. And it was like, I want that. And I never had that inclination when he was alive. I had no desire to be anything like him. You know, I was steeped in being a mom and a wife. And when he died, things started to shift. And then my mom passed 15 months later, and that's when everything really changed. And you'll hear oftentimes people talk about trauma as a cataclysmic event. And their deaths were very much a cataclysmic event, but my brother was the start of it. And I'd lost family members before my brother, but his passing was very different, that here today, gone tomorrow. And again, I go into depth on all that in a different video. That's a lot lengthier. And so he taught me how to live. He made me realize that I needed to have more fun and to let loose and to let go and to play. And so a lot of my business model is about adult play, nature-based play, getting outside and doing things that are very much outside your comfort zone. Really calculated, healthy risk taking. You know, the risk that my brother took on that mountain cost him his life. So I'm not a proponent of that type of risk taking. Unfortunately, people like my brother who have a very specific brain and don't have the fear that somebody like myself has, take those risks, and it always comes at a price. I was just watching a documentary on rock climbers and expert skiers and base jumpers, and they were talking about this. They know they're different. They know they're wired differently. They know every time that they go out and do what they do, and these are famous, these are like world famous people in that realm. And they know that they can die at any moment. As a matter of fact, one of the most famous female rock climbers was on the mountain rock climbing with her husband, and he fell to his death right in front of her. And, you know, her attitude about it, it's just amazing, because it did suck her under for the first year or so. They did have children together. She still rock climbs. And she said, you know, this is what they signed up for. And as much as she misses him, it's kind of par for the course in what they do. And so there's even one rock climber that climbs without ropes. And he's done one of the hardest climbs in history without a rope. I forget his name, but he was in the documentary. And I really recommend people watch this. I will put in the comments when I go look up the documentary. If you're into this stuff or just fascinated with psychology and how the human brain works, because these people are definitively wired in a very specific way. And I found them very inspiring. And you know, there was something almost every single one of them said in their interviews. None of them want to die. They don't have a death wish. Like, people think, oh, those people have a death wish. They don't want to die. They pray they're not going to die. They hope they don't. They say, I hope this isn't the day. But if they can't not do what they do. And I understand that. See, to me, that makes sense. They would die a soul death, a slow, painful soul death, if they weren't doing those risky, ultra adventurous things. And I get that. And that slow, painful death is brutal. I'd rather go like that. I'm sure most of you would agree. So yeah, it's just really interesting. And when I watch people like that, it actually helped me to integrate a lot of aspects of my grief. I don't think this is talked about enough. We hear, like, get over it. Grief is very much an integration practice. I believe so is forgiveness. And practices of integration are practices that we have to go back to again and again and again and again. So you're never going to get it done. That's why grief ebbs and flows. And forgiveness is the same way. Do you ever think you've forgiven someone or something, and then you get triggered and you get mad at yourself, right? Because you're like, I thought I was over this. Why am I here? Why is the tape replaying? And it's because you're human. It's because that's how it works. It's because, you know, the imperfections of life, the imperfections of our own humanity. And it's okay for things to circle back up and for you to have to go through the steps again of processing or forgiving, you know, or feeling the grief and finding a way through it. And so for me, part of the integration process is listening to people that are high risk takers. Really helped me to understand my brother much, much better. It's unfortunate. And I think part of my grief is still the parts that I grieve are not what people think. It's not his loss, because I fully accepted and integrated that. It's that I did not have this level of consciousness and awareness when he was alive that would have enabled us to have a very different connection. Now, mind you, and I've talked about this, so I don't want to be redundant, but we lived close to each other the last few years of his life, and we'd gotten very close, but there was a 10-year age difference. And even though we were close, I was steeped in raising my girls and being a mom. And it was usually him and my ex-husband going off and doing guy stuff, or us all hanging out together with my kids. But I didn't hike with my brother. I didn't travel with my brother. I didn't have adventures with my brother. And that is a grief I don't know that I will ever be able to completely get over. I mean, I accept it, but I still have these nudges of pain over it. Like, man, if I just had this awareness now. But I don't stay there, because because this new awareness has enabled me to turn my whole life around. And I haven't even scratched the surface in what I'm capable of. There are so many more things that I want to do and see. And I really hope that I have the ability to make some of that happen. I'm not going to be greedy and say all of it, because I would just be happy if some of it came to light. And the knowing that he's with me, like on a hike, I talk to him, I'll get signs from him. No one needs to tell me. People always say, oh, they're always with you. That's something people say when you express that you've lost someone, because a lot of times people don't know what to say, and it's just, people either really believe it or they just feel like they have to say something comforting. But I know my brother is always with me. And so I had myself an adventure yesterday, got a little bit beat up. I'm sure my brother was laughing his ass off at me when I completely wiped out for the third time, pretty bad, flat on my back. I'm more than sure he was laughing, because that would be his sense of humor. And the hiking guide actually reminded me a little bit of my brother, because that was his sense of humor. He laughed at me before. He was like, are you okay? Do you need help up? And I was like, I'm all right, man. I got this. And he's like, wow, if I wiped out like that, I would have broken my knee. And I was like, yeah, thank God I'm a yoga teacher, because it was not the most graceful fall. But if I didn't have the flexibility that I had, I would have been in big trouble. Anyway, life is meant to be lived. I've had a lot of tragedy. I've had a lot of loss. I've had a lot of heartbreak, an enormous amount of heartbreak. And I don't ever say these things or share these things as a woe is me. But I hope that it inspires people to develop the tools and take the time to really integrate and process, so that you too can kind of like reach for the stars and attempt to lasso the moon and turn your life around and really turn tragedy and trauma into triumph, because it is possible. I don't claim that my life is perfect, not even close, nor is that a goal for me. I fully embrace the imperfections of life, but there's much more to come. I'm in a very different place than I ever thought I would be. When I tell you I was enormously stuck in grief and pain, it was being at the bottom of a well for way too long of a time. And so being in this place that is more stable and filled with more light is a really beautiful gift. And it was hard work. People think you just float into these places in life and it just, happens so beautifully and magically. And that's not the reality. It took a lot of work and a lot of determination and grit. And I had to learn to be resourceful, and I had to learn to be my own best friend. And I had to learn to be patient with myself and life. And I had to do a lot of research. And I had to take the time to slow myself down enough to embody the things that I was researching and learning. And that is really profound, because what I've noticed in the self-help and the professional development world is that there are people who research and they're avid learners and they have insatiable curiosity like me, but they don't do anything with it. They become a talking head, kind of like everybody in the political realm. You know what I mean? So learning it is great, but you have to take the time to integrate it and embody it as fully and masterfully as you can. And I will leave it there, my beautiful friends. Be well.